What happens when a quiet, gentle superstar is pushed to her breaking point on live television? What happens when the warmth, grace, and patience that Selena Gomez is known for are suddenly tested by an unexpected clash? One that no one in the audience, not even the hosts themselves, could have predicted. Before we dive into this intense moment, make sure you subscribe to Talk Flair, and don't forget to like and comment, because what unfolds next is something viewers will be replaying again and again. The studio lights glowed with their usual soft haze, illuminating the familiar set of The View. The audience murmured with the buzzing curiosity only a high-profile guest like Selena Gomez could ignite. She walked onto the stage with her signature calm smile, her steps light, her eyes soft but observant. She wore a simple cream blazer, understated yet elegant, matching the quiet confidence she carried into every room. Everyone applauded, some even cheered, as she took her seat at the end of the table beside Sara Haines. At first, the energy was warm. Joy cracked a soft joke, Whoopi offered her trademark grounded welcome, and Sunny prepared her notes with the poised attentiveness of a seasoned journalist. Selena smiled politely, relaxing into the rhythm of what she thought would be a gentle, honest conversation about her upcoming projects, mental health advocacy, and the lessons she's learned over the past year. But beneath the warm glow of the studio lights, tension stirred, subtle at first, a faint ripple that only a few hyper-aware audience members sensed. It came in the form of a glance. A pause, a tightening in Sara Haines' posture as she shifted her note cards and leaned closer toward Selena. "So Selena," Sara began, her tone casual but laced with something sharper, "there's been a lot of conversation about your recent documentary clips that resurfaced online. Some people feel like you were, let's say, overly dramatic about certain parts of your journey." Selena blinked, her smile fading but still polite. She hadn't expected that to be the first question. She took a breath, adjusting the microphone clipped neatly to her lapel. "Well," she said softly, "I think everyone's journey looks different. I wasn't trying to be dramatic. I was trying to be honest." Sara nodded, but her expression held a faint skepticism, an energy the air seemed to tighten around. "Honest, sure. But some critics think there's a pattern of you leaning into being the victim. I'm curious, do you think you might be feeding into that narrative a bit?" The studio fell pin-drop silent. Joy's smile evaporated. Sunny shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Even Whoopi raised her eyebrows with a glance that said, "Whoa, we're really going there?" Selena froze, not visibly, but in the way her eyes flickered, just for a second. In the way her hand subtly curled against her knee beneath the table. A flash of hurt, confusion, disbelief. Of all the angles, of all the questions, she didn't expect Sara to accuse her of that. She swallowed lightly. "I don't think that's fair," she replied, her tone fragile but steady. "I share my story because a lot of people feel alone. I don't want anyone to feel the way I did." Sara leaned back in her chair, arms crossing slightly, not defiantly but challengingly. "But wouldn't you say there's a difference between sharing and, well, oversharing? You've built this huge identity around your struggles. At what point is enough enough?" A few members of the audience gasped. Someone whispered, too loud to be missed, "Oh my God." Selena's eyes welled almost instantly, not from weakness but from the raw shock of being misunderstood so deeply. She blinked quickly, trying to steady herself. The cameras zoomed subtly closer, sensing an emotional moment brewing. The entire room felt like it had stopped breathing. Before Selena could respond, Sunny interjected, her voice controlled but protective. "Sara, I think that's an oversimplification. Selena has helped millions of young people feel seen." Sara didn't back down. "And I respect that," she said, turning toward Sunny. "But I also think it's healthy to ask if constantly putting trauma at the center of your brand is." "Sara," Whoopi's voice cut through the air like a low thunderclap. "Let the girl answer." The audience erupted in applause, not loud but deeply supportive. Selena inhaled shakily, sitting a little straighter, though the tremble in her hands betrayed her. She looked at Sara, not angrily, not defensively, but with a wounded kind of honesty. "I'm not trying to make anything my brand," Selena said quietly. "I'm trying to heal. And healing doesn't always look pretty. It's not always linear. Sometimes it's messy and emotional and complicated. But it's real. And if sharing that helps someone else feel like they're not broken, then I'll keep sharing it." Her voice cracked on the last word. Sara's expression shifted, not fully softened, but taken aback, realizing perhaps the impact of her words. But the silence she left behind felt heavy, unresolved. Whoopi leaned forward. "Selena, You don't owe anyone an apology or an explanation for your healing, she said. You've lived a life most people can't imagine. And you're still here. That's something to celebrate. The audience applauded, louder this time, the clap echoing around the studio with a wave of warmth that Selena visibly absorbed. But Sara wasn't done, not entirely. She lifted her chin slightly, her voice calmer but still probing. I understand that. Truly. But do you think there's a point where you're reliving your pain instead of moving past it? Selena breathed out slowly, the hurt settling deeper in her eyes. She looked down for a moment, gathering herself, pressing her lips together as if holding back the rising tide of emotion that threatened to spill over. I think, she whispered, that only I can decide what moving past it looks like. Her voice was barely above a murmur. The room stayed silent, suspended in a moment that felt almost too intimate for daytime television. You could see the shimmer gathering in Selena's eyes, the trembling of her breaths, the vulnerability of someone trying desperately not to break down under the pressure of being dissected publicly. Joy cleared her throat, trying to ease the tension. Selena, you've always handled things with such grace, honestly. Selena nodded weakly, but her eyes were wet now, glassy, shimmering, seconds from spilling tears she couldn't blink away fast enough. She wiped quickly at one corner, hoping the audience wouldn't notice. They did. A soft, collective murmur rippled across the studio. And then Sara added softly, but in a way that struck just as sharply. I'm just trying to understand your perspective. Selena looked up at her slowly, heartbreak shining plainly through her eyes. And in that moment, caught between trying to defend herself and trying not to fall apart, her voice broke. Well, she whispered, it doesn't feel like you are. Her lip trembled. The audience gasped. Sara looked stunned. And for the first time on live television, Selena's tears began to well beyond her control. The moment Selena's voice cracked, the energy inside the studio shifted so drastically it was almost physical. A gentle murmur trembled through the audience, sympathy, shock, discomfort, all braided together in a single wave. It was as if the entire room leaned forward, holding its breath, unsure whether to protect her or brace for whatever came next. Selena looked down, blinking fast, trying to gather herself, but the tremor in her fingers gave her away. She brought her hand to her face, brushing a tear away with the back of her knuckle. Even that small gesture felt unbearably vulnerable, like witnessing a private moment she never intended to reveal on camera. Sara Haines shifted in her chair, her posture stiffening, her face caught somewhere between regret and defensiveness. She hadn't expected to push Selena this far. No one had. But the words had already been spoken, the wound already opened, and there was no taking it back. Sunny placed a gentle hand on Selena's forearm, her voice soft. Selena, it's okay. Take your time. Selena nodded, swallowing hard, her breathing shallow as she tried to steady it. She didn't want to cry. Not here, not like this, not in front of millions. But the emotion had swelled faster than she could contain it, breaking through the facade she had worked so hard to maintain. The cameras zoomed in subtly, capturing her profile, the lowered lashes, the quivering breath, the small shimmer of tears gathering like fragile pearls. The audience watched in an almost reverent silence. For the first time, this wasn't just a celebrity interview. It felt like watching someone's heart fracture in real time. Whoopi leaned forward, her voice gentle but firm. Selena, I'm sorry this took such a turn. You don't deserve to feel attacked. Selena inhaled shakily. I know, she whispered. I know you're all just doing your jobs, but I wasn't ready for that. Her eyes flickered toward Sara, her expression pained. I've worked so hard to get better. Hearing it questioned like that, it hurts. Sara opened her mouth, then closed it. She looked down at her notes as if they held an escape route, but found none. When she finally spoke, her voice was low. I didn't mean to hurt you. Selena wiped another tear from her cheek, her voice soft but trembling. Intent doesn't always lessen the impact. The audience murmured again, some nodding solemnly. It wasn't an attack. It was truth, simple and raw. Joy, always the one to diffuse tension with warmth, leaned slightly closer. Selena, sweetheart, you've shown more resilience than most people ever will. Nobody here thinks you're seeking attention. You're telling your truth. But Selena shook her head slightly, the hurt still fresh. It's just, I'm tired, Joy. I'm tired of fighting to be understood. Tired of people assuming that vulnerability is manipulation. The silence that followed was thick, almost heavy enough to touch. Sara exhaled, finally forcing herself to meet Selena's gaze. I think I phrased things in a way that came off harsher than I intended, she said carefully. I genuinely wanted to understand your mindset. I didn't want it to feel like an attack. Her voice faltered. I'm sorry if it did. But Selena wasn't ready to accept or reject the apology. Her heart was still swelling too painfully inside her chest. She inhaled shakily, staring down at her hands, soft, delicate, clasped tightly together beneath the table as though holding herself from falling apart. Sunny looked at Sara, her expression controlled but unmistakably stern. There's a difference between curiosity and insensitivity, she said. We ask hard questions on this show, but there's a way to ask them. Sarah's jaw tightened slightly. I understand that. Whoopi's voice came next, calm but edged with authority. We don't tear people down to get clarity. Sara nodded, her eyes flickering away again. Selena took in their voices, their support, their defense, but it didn't erase the ache in her chest. She leaned back in her chair, closing her eyes for a brief second, inhaling slowly. The studio lights painted a soft glow across her face, catching the remnants of moisture on her lashes. I'm trying so hard, she whispered finally, her voice barely audible. Every day I wake up and choose to keep going, to keep healing, to keep believing that my story matters. But moments like this make me question why I bother opening up at all. A woman in the audience placed her hand over her heart, visibly emotional. Someone else whispered, Oh, honey. It wasn't pity, it was empathy. Pure, human empathy. Selena looked back at Sara, her eyes glistening but resolute. You asked why I share so much, she said softly. It's because I don't want anyone else to feel like they're alone in the dark. I want them to know there's another side to pain. But when you question whether I'm using my trauma, it feels like you're telling me the darkest parts of my life are for entertainment. A tear slipped down her cheek then, slow and unguarded. Sarah's face softened, fully this time. The defensive lines around her eyes disappeared. I'm truly sorry, she whispered, voice cracking just slightly. That wasn't my intention. I misjudged the sensitivity of the topic. And I misread how much it means to you. But the apology landed in the space between them like a fragile truce, uncertain, incomplete. Selena wiped her cheek again, her hand trembling. I know you're not trying to hurt me, she said gently. But it did hurt. Sara nodded quietly. I understand. Whoopi took a breath and turned to the cameras, breaking the tension with her steady presence. Folks, let's take a moment. These conversations matter. Mental health matters. Compassion matters. Selena exhaled deeply at those words. For the first time since the clash began, something inside her softened, a thin crack of relief beneath the pain. Whoopi continued, her tone grounding. We're not here to tear anyone down. We're here to learn from each other. Selena, thank you for being here. And for being brave enough to be real. Selena nodded, fighting, to pull herself back together, though her eyes were still swollen, her voice still trembling. She lifted her chin slightly, reclaiming a small piece of her composure. But even as she tried to steady her breathing, the emotional storm brewing inside her had only just begun. And everyone watching, the hosts, the audience, the viewers at home, felt the tension rise again like a tide preparing to pull her under. The studio felt colder now, as if the temperature had dropped with the weight of what had been said. Selena sat with her hands interlocked, fingertips trembling slightly, trying to steady her breath. Though she'd managed to regain a sliver of composure, her eyes were still rimmed with red, and the room carried an unspoken fragility, as if any sudden movement could shatter her all over again. Joy cleared her throat gently, attempting to guide the conversation into safer waters. Selena, you've been such an advocate for mental health. Truly, maybe this is a good moment to talk about what healing has looked like for you. Selena nodded slowly, her lips pressed together, but the effort to speak seemed monumental. She inhaled, gently wiping beneath her eyes again, then tried to answer. Healing, she began, the word cracking at the edges, isn't pretty. And it's not fast. People think it's this linear journey where you wake up better every day, but it's not. Some days you wake up, and you feel like you've taken 10 steps backward. Her voice softened into something sorrowful. And those days can make you feel like you're failing. The audience listened in absolute silence. No coughs, no whispers. Just the sound of Selena's quiet voice filling the space. And when I talk about those moments publicly, she continued, it's not because I want sympathy. It's because if someone else out there wakes up feeling that same darkness, I want them to know they're not failing either. Her voice trembled again, and she looked down, her lashes wet. Sunny reached toward her once more, offering a soft squeeze on her arm. "And that's brave," she said. "What you're doing matters." But the tension that had been swirling ever since Sarah's first question still clung stubbornly to the air. Everyone felt it, especially Sara herself, who seemed unable to rest while the unspoken wound still hung between them. Finally, after a beat of silence, she spoke. "Selena," Sara said cautiously, "I know I said I didn't intend to hurt you, but I feel like I should explain where that question came from. Because clearly I approached it wrong." Selena tensed, just slightly, but visibly enough that the audience reacted with a concerned hum. Whoopi's eyes flickered toward Sara with a silent warning, "Tread carefully." But Sara pressed on, her voice hesitant. "We live in a world where everyone's story, everyone's pain, is out there on social media. And sometimes it feels hard to tell what's authentic and what's curated." She paused. "I think I got caught up in that mindset, and I shouldn't have applied it to you." Selena looked up slowly, her expression unreadable. Sara continued, her tone softer now. "You're one of the few people who's been genuinely transparent about mental health. I should have acknowledged that. And I'm sorry for not giving you the benefit of the doubt." A few audience members nodded, cautious approval, but the tension still hadn't broken. Selena held her breath for a long moment before responding. "Thank you," she said quietly. "I appreciate you saying that. But I hope you understand how hard it is for me to come on shows like this and talk about things that have nearly broken me." Sara nodded. "I do. I really do." But even as the exchange softened, something inside Selena cracked deeper. Not from anger now, but from exhaustion. Her shoulders sagged slightly, and she reached up to press her fingertips gently against the side of her forehead, as though trying to ground herself. Whoopi glanced toward the producers off camera, sensing the vulnerability teetering on the edge. But the audience leaned in as Selena began speaking again. This time with a sincerity so raw it made the room feel too small for the emotion it held. "I've been working on myself for years," she said softly. "Therapy, medication, reflection, learning to forgive people, forgive myself. Some days I feel strong. Other days," she paused as her voice broke again. "Other days I don't know if I'm doing enough. Or if I'm enough." A painful silence swept the audience. One woman dabbed at her own eyes. A man in the back pressed his hand to his mouth. Selena looked toward the floor again, her tears gathering despite her efforts to blink them away. "And when someone suggests I'm playing the victim," she whispered, her voice trembling, "it makes me feel like all the progress I've made doesn't matter. Like everything I've survived becomes a joke." Sarah's face crumpled slightly, not dramatically, but with a genuine remorse she hadn't allowed herself to show earlier. "I'm so sorry," she said again, leaning forward, her voice shaking. "I was wrong. That wasn't fair." But Selena wasn't looking at her now. She was staring straight ahead, lost in the emotional current that had been pulled to the surface. She took a shaking breath. "I know I'm sensitive," she said. "I know I feel things deeply. People have told me that my whole life. But I don't see that as a weakness. I've learned that being open, being emotional, that takes strength." She wiped her cheek again, this time with the edge of her sleeve, her breath faltering as she tried to regain control. Sunny spoke up softly. "It does take strength." Joy added gently, "And we all feel deeply about something. Some of us just hide it better." The moment was tender, a small, fragile reprieve. But then something happened that no one expected. Selena lifted her gaze toward the audience, slowly, deliberately. And for the first time since her tears fell, she let out a trembling exhale that sounded eerily close to a sob she was trying desperately to suppress. "I'm just tired," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I'm so tired of pretending I'm okay all the time." The studio froze. Sarah's eyes widened. Sunny's hand tightened around Selena's. Whoopi leaned forward, whispering, "Selena, you don't have to pretend here." And that was it. Selena broke. Her breath hitched in a sharp, fragile gasp, and tears spilled over her cheeks in a slow, unstoppable stream. She covered her mouth with one hand, trying to quiet the sound, but the tremble gave her away. A soft, sympathetic gasp rippled across the audience. Someone whispered, "Oh no," another voice murmured, "she needs a break." Even the camera operators hesitated, unsure whether to zoom in or pull back. It was a moment so vulnerable, so real, that capturing it felt almost invasive. Sara leaned toward her, instinctively reaching out. "Selena." But Selena gently shook her head, overwhelmed. She tried to inhale, but the breaths came uneven, broken, her shoulders trembling. It wasn't anger now. It wasn't even hurt. It was a release. Years of pressure, expectations, misunderstandings, scrutiny, pain, all of it spilling out in front of millions. The hosts exchanged worried glances. Joy whispered urgently to Whoopi, "We should cut to break." But before she could finish, Selena's voice returned, shaky but determined. "No," she whispered. "Don't stop the cameras." Everyone froze. Selena lifted her tear-streaked face, eyes swollen, expression raw. "I need people to see this." The moment the words left Selena's lips, "I need people to see this," the entire studio went still. Even the cameras seemed to hesitate, as if uncertain whether they were allowed to witness a moment this intimate. Selena's tears were still fresh on her face, glistening under the studio lights, but something in her expression had changed. She wasn't breaking anymore. She was revealing. Whoopi leaned back, taken aback by the bravery in Selena's eyes. "If you're sure," she said gently, "we're with you." Selena nodded slowly. "People only ever see the polished version of me," she whispered. "The interviews where I smile, the photos where I look strong, the statements where I pretend I'm not hurting. But this," she touched her chest, fingers trembling. "This is the truth. I get overwhelmed. I try to be brave. But I'm still human." A powerful silence swept through the room, heavier than any argument, any controversy, any dramatic moment on the show in years. The audience didn't just listen. They absorbed her words like something sacred. Sara, visibly shaken, leaned forward. Her voice was soft, fragile almost. "Selena, I'm so sorry. Truly. I never would have asked that if I knew how much you were carrying." Selena didn't look angry anymore. Just tired. Tired in the way someone is when they've spent years walking uphill without rest. "I know you didn't mean to hurt me," she said quietly. "But you did. And it's important to say that. Because people who watch this show, they go through these kinds of conversations every day. People questioning their pain, their struggles, their worth." Her breath trembled as she continued. "And it hurts. It really hurts." Sara's eyes filled with tears now, not out of embarrassment but remorse. "You're right," she whispered. "And I'm sorry for being one of those people." The apology wasn't dramatic. It wasn't performative. It was quiet, heartfelt, and something inside Selena softened at the sincerity. Sunny leaned in, her voice filled with compassion. "What you're doing right now, it's not weakness. It's strength. Real strength." Selena exhaled shakily, nodding. "I'm trying," she said. "I'm trying every day to give people hope, to remind them that they're not alone. But sometimes," her voice cracked again, "sometimes I forget that I'm not alone either." A wave of emotion moved through the audience. Sniffles, soft gasps, whispered words of support. One woman called out, "We love you, Selena." Another murmured, "You're not alone." And slowly, the entire room began to warm with something like unity. Joy wiped a tear from the corner of her eye. "This is why your fans love you," she said softly. "You let them in, even when it costs you something." Selena closed her eyes briefly, inhaling a shaky breath. "It does cost me," she whispered. "But I don't ever want to be someone who hides behind perfection. That's not real. That's not life." Whoopi leaned forward, her voice steady. "Selena, thank you for trusting us. Thank you for trusting this moment." But then the moment shifted, subtly but undeniably. The vulnerability on the table wasn't just Selena's anymore. It was everyone's. The hosts. The audience. The millions watching at home. It was as if the entire studio had peeled back a layer of itself. Sara, finally gathering the courage to speak again, turned fully to Selena. "Can I say something?" Selena looked at her, eyes still shining with tears but open. Sara's voice wavered as she began. "I asked a harsh question today. A question that came from a place of skepticism, not empathy. And that was wrong." She swallowed hard. "But you taught me something in this moment. You reminded me that vulnerability is not a performance. It's a truth. And I'm grateful you showed me that." Selena didn't respond right away. She simply looked at Sara, really looked at her, as if weighing the sincerity in her expression. Finally, she nodded once, a slow but meaningful gesture. And with that, the room exhaled. It wasn't forgiveness exactly. It was understanding. Whoopi took a breath, nodded to the producers, and then addressed the crowd. "Everyone, let's give Selena a moment." But before she could usher the show into a break, Selena shook her head softly. "I'm okay," she whispered. "Really?" Sunny asked gently. "Do you want to continue the interview?" Selena hesitated, just a split second, then answered with a steadiness she didn't have earlier. "Yes. I think I do. The audience erupted into supportive applause. Not loud or chaotic, but heartfelt, warm, and grounding. The kind of applause that said we're with you. When the applause died down, Selena lifted her chin, her voice firmer now. Healing isn't linear, she said. But moments like this, they remind me that it's real. And that I'm allowed to feel things deeply. Joy smiled warmly. You've turned a painful moment into something powerful. Selena offered a small, fragile smile. I hope someone watching this finds the strength to be honest about their feelings too. Even if their voice shakes. The emotional storm inside the room softened, not gone, but transformed into something gentler. Something healing. Whoopi leaned forward. Before we wrap this segment, Selena, is there anything you want to say to the people watching? Selena paused, gaze drifting toward the cameras. And when she spoke, her voice was soft, but unwavering. If you're struggling, she said, I want you to know you're allowed to feel everything you feel. You're allowed to break down. You're allowed to ask for help. And you don't have to pretend you're strong every second of the day. Another tear slipped down, but this time she didn't wipe it away. And most importantly, you're not alone. There was no script, no performance, just truth. The audience rose to their feet, an unprompted standing ovation. Applause thundered through the studio, filling it with warmth, gratitude, and a kind of hope that made the air feel lighter. Selena covered her heart with one hand, overwhelmed but smiling through the tears. Not broken, not defeated, human. The cameras held on her for a moment, the softened eyes, the trembling breath, the quiet strength returning in waves. Then the screen slowly faded to commercial. But the conversation didn't fade outside the studio. Within minutes, the clip began circulating online. Fans posting support. Mental health advocates praising her vulnerability. Hashtags trending. Comment sections flooding with empathy, sorrow, outrage, admiration. The world reacted just as intensely as the studio did. And as the story spread, it became clear. This wasn't just another celebrity interview. It was a moment. A human moment. One that people would remember. One that would echo. One that would spark conversations around honesty, empathy, and the right to feel deeply. At the end of the day, as the credits rolled and the lights dimmed, one truth remained. Selena Gomez didn't just cry on national television. She reminded millions what it means to be real. And now, if you watching this felt moved by this story, don't keep it to yourself. Comment below and tell us, was Selena right to express her emotions? Did Sara cross a line? What would you have done in her place? Your voice matters. And if you want more intense, dramatic, cinematic celebrity moments like this, subscribe to Talk Flair, hit the like button, and turn on notifications so you never miss another explosive story. Because this is just the beginning.